And welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. Want to remind you that we are now brought to you by the Costas Inn. Everybody knows the Costas Inn is a great place to go eat. It's also a great place to take out from. Think of the Costas Inn at 4100 North Point Boulevard for the best in takeout. 410-477-1975, the number. Gary Stein joins me. And as luck would have it, every once in a while, a squirrel finds a nut. We plan to have a sports business show tonight, and we are happy to announce Marty, Conway, and Andy Dolich have solved the baseball labor confrontation. Gentlemen, thank you for being on with us.
And we're here to tell you first.
Yes, I think that the group at PressBox, Gary, Stan, your support staff, Marty and Andy, we will take total credit along with
full credit.
Jackie Roosevelt Robinson, quality lawyers, individuals on both sides. The good news is that we don't have to deal with the bad news anymore.
Yeah. After 99 days, they get this done. The deal is done. It's a 5-year deal. It will take us through the 26th season. But Marty, there's one, I want to start with you. There's one thing out there that I'm confused about. At the end, they have not agreed upon the international league, the international player draft. They've kicked it down the can a couple months. Is there some type of caveat at the end if they don't get it done by July 25th?
I think they have connected that to the qualifying offers for free agents, and that if they establish an international draft, MLB will drop the qualifying offer component, draft pick, etc. But if they have not, then that will stay in for next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, Andy, who won here? The fans that they get to 162?
In my view, gentlemen, no one is the victor in this. If you look at the times in which we live, if you look at the incredible competition for the dollar in so many different areas, this was fought tooth and nail in multiple forms of media, talking about the fluid that flows through the veins of sports, which is green. And you've picked this time to have this conversation, this kind of mixed martial arts, in my view, insanity. That's L, owners lose, L, players lose, and most of all, well, L, fans lose. And think about the hundreds of thousands of people that work in businesses in and around every form of baseball, from the lowest level of the minors to the highest level of the majors.
Marty, before I turn you over to Gary Stein, you guys, let me ask you, how big a loser is Rob Manfred in the way this negotiation was handled?
You need to put that in a different way, Stan. I think you need to ask that question a bit differently.
More diplomatically?
Well, it's just my New York sarcastic view, the way you asked the question.
Well, I mean, to me, he comes out as the big loser in this. I mean, he and the owners and the negotiators on the players' side, they knew from May, June 2020 that this was going to be very contentious. There seems like there was an awful lot of runway between June 2020 and February 15th to have negotiated in good faith. I don't think the owners really negotiated in good faith until it was really upon the bewitching hour. Marty?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But always just keep in mind that having been in a couple of different types of collective bargaining negotiations, the players were looking to take back significant turf that Tony Clark and others lost more recently. And so when you say earlier to Andy, who wins and not, there clearly is no winners. But I think of it like a tug of war in that classic summer camp game where there's a ribbon in the middle of the rope and there's a white chalk line on the ground. And, it's over when one team can pull somebody from the other side over that line. And I think the players here, and I go back to the agent infrastructure, the environment of the agents, because I think they had a lot to do here. They were looking to pull back significant territory that they lost over the last 10 years. I think it's clear. And so even when you read the fact that in the final ratification by the Players Association Executive Committee, it was 26-12. So out of 38 people, roughly a third of the players said they wouldn't have agreed with this deal. So it was not unanimous on the player side. And so there's still a lot of animus there in that regard. So to your original question about Rob, look, I've said this before, I'll say it to anybody, including wherever, baseball needs a CEO. Rob can do a decent job as commissioner and his experience and all these other things, but they need a CEO. They were at their peak in the early 2000s when MLB, when their internet company was up and running. Steve Jobs was showing off all of their, applications on an Apple day, and they lost momentum over the last decade because their infrastructure of business just hasn't been there. Rob is not the guy. And I'll end with this. There was a set of press conferences a week ago when we thought we had a deal and it fell apart. Tony Clark gave his with players on either side, inside, lots of questions. Rob gave his press conference somewhere outside with the wind blowing, his papers blowing. He doesn't come across in a way that conveys baseball the way that people would want it to see. So that's my take in terms of who I think wins and where Rob ends up on this scale. Not good. He does not measure up to a Bud Selig or some others in terms of being able to navigate through these issues.
To Marty's point, and we've been involved in a number of different sports, and we've talked about this before on the show, teamwork, leadership, and trust is necessary at every level, especially when you're dealing with professional athletics. And I would underscore what Marty just said. Rob is a very capable chief legal officer. If you look at baseball, tell me who the chief marketing officer is. Tell me who the chief communications officer is. Rob, you can't practice backswings. You cannot smile when you're delivering messaging to tens of millions of people that love the game and want to see the game and really don't give a crap about all this stuff you're talking about. They want to go to baseball games. Yeah. So to that point, it's the office of the commissioner. And Marty and I have been in when there have been some absolute top level people in different positions and some offices that are vacant. And if you really grade Major League Baseball against the competition, who's there and what are they doing and what will they be doing now to basically move forward? That is a key factor, how you're reintroducing the game and trying to get some positive traction. That's going to show who knows what they're talking about from a business operations marketing standpoint.
Gary,
so it's interesting, Andy. I'm glad you brought that up. And maybe we do this interview on two different tracks here. And the reason why I say that is, and just to let you know, I'm a business guy. Okay, I own my own business. My dad had a thriving business down in Florida.
And you're a CPA. You're also a CPA, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah. So, I get the business part of it, and usually I'm interested in that. I can't tell you how disinterested I was in this whole business affair between the players and the owners. The reason being because of what's going on in the world today and what has gone on in the world over the last couple of years. And for Major League Baseball and the players and the owners to do this at this time sunk my level of interest in baseball to an all-time low. And I used to love baseball more than any other sport. Having said that, what I'm interested in is the things that could make baseball better. for the fans, not the millionaires and the billionaires. I don't care if he makes 500,000 or 750. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he makes 35 million or 42 million. It doesn't matter to me. And you know what? At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter to them either. They think it matters, but it doesn't matter because they're never going to spend it anyway. But regardless of that, okay?
Are you saying,
What
Gary,
out of
that they
this-
have, are you saying they have plenty of money?
Saying they got plenty of money,
They
Stan.
got
So Andy, my question, and then I'll turn over to Marty after that, is what came out of this that's actually going to make the game better? Rules changes, playoffs, the designated hitter. What do you think is actually of interest to the fans that make the game better today?
Make the game better. I don't see that yet, Gary. Getting the game back to playing, that's, that seems pretty simple, but they didn't have the ability to do that. And there's a number from last year that would scare the living hell out of me as a baseball business person, even with the pandemic. You guys can correct me. There were 6 franchises that didn't draw over 1 million people last year. Now let's put Toronto aside because they couldn't go back to their country and they had to play in their minor league facility, and then they moved to Buffalo. But my Oakland A's, these guys had the lowest attendance since 1979. Now, baseball's coming back, but there's Marcus Semien. He's gone. Is Olsen staying? Is Chapman going? Oh, Bob isn't there anymore. New manager, Mark Kotsay. What are they going to draw? And they're in this, are we staying? Are we going? And look at Tampa Bay and look at Miami and look at others like that. So what I would want, Gary, to your question, I would want to see a strategic marketing plan that baseball had at least 3.5 months to think about, to lay out to hundreds of millions in fans. And Gary, if you called up, who would it be, Marty? Karen Timpano?
Yeah, yes.
Is that who it would be? Or Tim Pone?
Yes.
I
Tim
think
Pone, yeah.
Tim Pone, and say, Karen, we'd love to have you on to explain the interactive marketing campaign that you're laying out through America to reintroduce people to baseball, and basically vaccinate them against the crap that they've listened to for the last several months. Do they have that? I'm guessing they don't. They have some tactics, Gary, that they'll throw out, but do they have a coherent long-term strategy for this season? I think not.
Marty, let me ask you a question. And this is just symbolic to me. And if I'm wrong, let me know. So the designated hitter now is going to be in the National League, correct? Okay.
After 48 years in the American League.
Right. So that's my point. 1973, Ron Blomberg, Yankees, first designated hitter. It took Major League Baseball 48 years to make the American League and the National League basically play by the same rules. Just a simple question, Marty. How does that happen? How does it take 48 years to do that?
Yeah. It's been my experience being in rooms, in sorts of meetings with Andy and other people. Baseball has an allergy to one word, and it's spelled CHANGE. Virtually anything that's brought up as a change suddenly gets thrown into, are we moving the game? What about the history of the game? So as I said, that's been their issue, is that but in the meantime, Dean Smith tried to slow basketball down, and they said, no, we're going to a shot clock, and you name it. That's the job of the leadership.
Every sport,
of the game,
everywhere. Yeah.
Is to always stay ahead and to try to make the game more interesting. So when you said earlier, what changes? So apparently they've agreed on some rule changes that have things to do with trying to shorten the game, pitch clocks and other things. And again, I think that's all helpful. I think the narrative of the games are too long certainly is true, but it's overused. Those of us that have been to a game, we don't know the difference between a 2-hour and 40-minute game and one that's 3:02 if it's interesting, right? But it's those games that run on forever that's not. So in that regard, maybe they are going to able to do that. But again, it gets bogged down by players. They tested these in the minor leagues, and it gets bogged down by players saying, well, what if I step off? Does that reset the clock? And all these other things. Again, the international draft was caught up in players saying, I don't know, is that good for agents? Is it good for me? Hell, every sport that has a draft includes the world. The NBA has been doing it for decades, and it's worked out really well. But back to Andy's point, what baseball needs today, in our view, my view, I know for sure, is a Marshall Plan, right? They almost blew up the landscape.
Not Mike
Now,
Marshall. Let Marty
exactly.
explain it. We're not talking.
So the year, we're going to rebuild Europe. We're going to rebuild baseball with a Marshall Plan. And it starts by saying, keep in mind, Major League Baseball is corporate baseball. It's not baseball down the street at my sandlot, at my little league field. It's whatever.
Kevin Costner. Kevin, can you walk through the corn stalk? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So MLB is corporate baseball. It's not baseball. If they didn't have a plan that started tomorrow with freebaseballtickets.com, so that anybody that wanted a free ticket in April and May could get one, and it, whatever they were willing to put a lot of money on for people that work and all these other things. Freebaseball.com, April, May, you get a free ticket. You have to buy one, whatever it is, like things that are bold like that, because quite honestly, baseball's CBA announcement today is going to be sandwiched between 2 NFL quarterback trades, and who knows what else is coming in the NFL this weekend. And so within 48 hours, people will stop probably talking about baseball, and they'll start talking about football in March, and then March Madness comes and all that. So, again, that's the kind of lack of thinking, I think.
To Marty's point, and I'm totally into the Marshall Plan for those people that have any institutional awareness, especially since we're looking at war in Europe right now. But I use this term, and I kind of like it in a piece that I wrote the other day, and Marty said tug of war. I viewed this as a tug of wads, WADS, giant wads of money.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the fans don't really care about that. They want the game. And the last point, Gary, to your question, I think baseball, like boxing, has a concussion. It took a roundhouse to the head. And for anybody who's had a concussion, it takes a while. You just can't shake your head and get the cobwebs out. And, the trainers in there, they're figuring stuff out, but without a coherent strategy, and not just for the next few weeks or months, but for the next few years, as they fall further and further back, as young people take this, which is not shaped like a baseball diamond. It's shaped like a basketball court. It's shaped like a football stadium. It's shaped like your best friend communication. And it goes tick, tock, and all these other things. Where is baseball? The Apple announcement got completely lost in the middle of all this. You're doing business with Apple, whether you like streaming or not. You just poof, gone. Field of Dreams was a 10 for baseball. Period, end of sentence. What did they do to pay it forward? What are they doing? Here we talk about Jackie Robinson. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional. What about Field of Dreams at Rickwood Field for the Negro League players? Where you have a tremendous lack of diversity of American-born African-American players that is getting smaller and smaller each year.
Every year. Yeah.
Who can answer that question for me?
Does baseball get, Marty, an added little bonus though? We went on the air 20 minutes ago, and what I read was the CBA was to be ratified by the owners at 6:30, and immediately upon that ratification, it's going to be all hell breaking loose in baseball with free agents, signings, trades. Will that spark some interest, and maybe be an unintended consequence of this is maybe baseball will see we've got to do something that gets a lot of action going on?
Yeah, it's possible. Remember, December 1st, one day before the lockout started, in that 48-hour period of there was, I forget how many billion dollars signed in free agent signings, and so it tends to come in spurts. But one of the things that I have noted, and I look at the NFL and I look at the NBA specifically for things like this, there are more people, individuals, not directly connected to the game, but indirectly connected to the game, who count themselves as NBA insiders, NFL insiders, and they spend 360 days a year tweeting, talking, and referencing about basketball, football, etc. If we waited on this Zoom plan for another 10 minutes, we couldn't come up with 20, right? We have Tim Kirchin, we have Buster Olney, we have a few others. There's not near baseball. I mean, football and basketball have done a marvelous job of expanding the infrastructure around baseball where people directly and now indirectly profit and frankly make a career about talking about the sport. And so again, here we are in the middle of March. March Madness is a week away. The NFL has been over for a month, but it still dominates the consciousness of media and people. And that's what baseball hasn't done a good job. And I directly look at both the players and the owners. Look, Scott Boras said he thought this was one of the best coverages, media coverages of a CBA that he's ever seen. No kidding, because virtually every person was talking about what the players needed, et cetera, right? And so they have got to come together and say, we've got to build this infrastructure because you need more companies like PressBox who are willing to talk about baseball 365 days a year if necessary. And that's just not something that the clubs or baseball have made a conscious effort to do. In fact, they probably have retracted some of that and tried to keep it within. So, I mean, that's the difference. When I came to Baltimore in the mid 80s, there were shows talking about baseball, post-game, other time, other people talking about it on daytime radio, and that virtually is non-existent anymore.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question. So if could we write this down? I'd like to know what the attendance will be, not opening night or opening day, the game after. Can you write down what the, no, I'm serious. You know,
Yeah, right.
write down what the attendance is for these two franchises.
All right, I'm gonna
this-
write it down.
And this one here, because that is an indicator to what Marty just talked about. And for Scott Boras to say this was one of the most professional, insightful, immersive reportage, is that a word? Yes, reportage of a CBA. That's like, that was the best reporting on a proctological exam that I've had in the last 5 years. I mean, what are you talking about? Play the game, make it interesting. Instead of all these 4-letter words, can we get back to the 3-letter word, which is FUN, which is what to a certain extent baseball has lost.
What does it say? What does it say?
O's 4,500, Washington 12,000.
Okay, so
Okay,
we're
good.
going.
That's the game. That's the second game, right?
Second
Okay,
game, right?
so we're gonna have a national sweepstakes on PressBox Live, and the other point here is the players. You know, it's not just the billionaires. How, you know, you look at what's happened in minor league baseball, 40 gone, poof, see you later. And those laboratories of bringing people back, you don't think that has had a cascade effect of negativity down to all of the, you know, the remaining, what, 120?
Andy, you've talked at great length about what you stole as a marketing person working at the major league level.
Yes.
I say that complimentary
Proud of it.
Proud of it. What you stole from the minor leagues, and now they've basically shat upon the minor leagues the past couple of years.
Well, I have high regard for somebody who was an absolute 10 at the Sloan Analytics Conference. I really do. But, and I understand analytics and metrics in baseball, but I also understand just having fun and getting those kids re-engaged. Baseball is complicated, but no more complicated than a freaking bobblehead that you give out that people love. You know, I mean, I'd have bobblehead week at the Oakland Coliseum to reintroduce people.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question here, Marty, to you first. You know, we're talking about the players, and we're talking about the owners, and we're talking about how baseball is falling behind, has fallen behind. They're not is falling, they have fallen behind. basketball and football in the mind's eye of the sports consumer. Andy, you waved that phone. Obviously, that's a big part of it, et cetera, for the youth. I'm just wondering here for a minute, and correct me if I'm wrong. Could the actual economic structure of Major League Baseball be a part of the reason why baseball has fallen behind? And what I mean by that is, if you look at football, all the teams basically share the revenue fairly equally. The TV contract, the merchandising is all shared, divided by 32. There's local revenues that they all get to their own, obviously, but it seems to me like it's a coordinated effort because everybody is sharing. The players are sharing in it. They have a certain amount of the TV pie, and all the owners share equally. Can baseball say the same thing, A? And B, if not, could that make the negotiations and the lack of camaraderie between the players and owners even worse, and then therefore affect the product and affect change over the course of time? Is there anything to that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Gary, and a good observation. And baseball shares a significant amount of revenues. I think 48% of all local revenues get shared in one way or the other to do it. And I think that that's what they've tried to do over the last 2 collective bargaining agreements, is to raise the tide and to do that. But I would submit to you this, and I like Andy's response to this, which is, to me, baseball has been at its apex when there were certain people in the game who drove the narrative. Charlie Finley, George Steinbrenner, Bill Veeck. You could go on down the list periodically to see who these people are, but they were over the top, either in promotion or wanting to win or whatever, who were literally almost disruptive in some regards to the game. But they were like Al Davis. They drove the game to higher levels, whether they intended to or not, to be a part of it.
A little bit like Jerry Jones too.
Yeah, because I think what happens is when you try to simonize everything in the game and to make it such that everybody has a chance, or this, that, and the other thing, I would submit to you, I don't think the best sports are the ones where somebody different wins every year. I think the sports that get the biggest following are when you have the TV teams and everybody else, and they're striving to knock those franchises off.
Yeah.
Right. Striving to not knock the Yankees off, striving to knock the Dodgers off, to do that. And so I think there has to be some people in the game that rise to the level. Maybe it'll be a Stephen Cohn in New York, or I'm not sure where it'll be, but they'll drive that to the point where they'll make that competitive. I don't think it works the other way, where you have 6 or 7 teams heading to 100+ losses, trying to rebuild it through that. I think it's nice. That's a cute story, but I don't really think it does anything overall for the game. That's my take.
You want greatness. You want to see greatness during your time. And as Marty brought up before, you're competing. So here in the Bay Area, okay, the A's have a big question mark on them. People want the Giants back on the field because they have a heck of a ball club. You know, who's going to do this? Buster's not there. But you've got a much greater debate in the Bay Area right this minute. When is Draymond Green coming back? When is Steph going to score 100 in a game? Stanford women, are they going to win the national championship again? And Tara Vanderveer is, you know, she's the best of all coaches. Jimmy G, is he going? Is he staying? That is much more in the general conversation than John Fisher. Will he be at opening night? You know, when we did this, our team was owned by Levi Strauss. Yeah. Nobody cared about Levi Strauss. They cared about this. You know, those numbers that you put in there before, Stan, for batting practice for these guys, we averaged about 7,500 a game. Batting practice.
Wow.
7,500 a game. We opened up an hour early.
You know, Gary's question is a fascinating question, and it really has to do, though, with market territory. In the NFL, there were no big market teams when this came about, Gary. Whereas in baseball, the people that owned the New York Giants, New York Yankees, they didn't want to give up their share
Right, that's
to
true.
share it with, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Pete Rozelle was the one that was able to convince them, and they got fortunate enough with the 58 championship game that they fell into something that was pretty amazing.
You
Mhm.
think about media out there. There's no other sport that even comes close to baseball. Movies, baseball cards, TV shows, top-notch musical, Broadway shows, comedy routines. When is the anime in Japan? When is the last time baseball said, wow, we've got all this? Shouldn't we sort of use that? When is the last time, we talked about this before, that you've seen a national TV advertising campaign featuring a baseball player?
Right. We've
Great
talked
point.
about it.
That's a
Can't-
great point, and
yeah.
that rubs what Marty said about the difference between Rob Manfred and Bud Selig, who Gary was a businessman. You know, at his
Yeah, no,
core, he
yeah.
owned a mid-market, small market team. You know,
Let me ask a question, and this may be unconventional, but would it make sense, in your opinion, for baseball maybe as just a small first step to say to do I'm not necessarily a marketing campaign, but a national campaign saying, hey, we're sorry, we understand, like, can actually do a mea culpa now and try to, because people like to get apologized to.
the
People like to hear other people say they're sorry.
The commissioner did say that tonight to the fans,
But who
they're not
watched
going to
it?
come
Yeah.
out. They're not going to come
Yeah.
out in a marketing campaign and admit that.
Well,
we're-
and just to build on that though, Gary, logos don't talk, players talk, right? People want to hear from players. They want to know
Okay.
more about players. They want to do that. So I'm not suggesting that it has to be the players to do it, whatever. But the point is, logos just, that's what they are. Like I said, MLB is corporate baseball. I think what they could do is they could look at this and say, we're going to put our arms around every place where a kid picks up a bat, a ball, softball, a broomstick, I don't know, whatever it is, we're going to surround that and we're going to say, you all belong together. And that is not just, what happens in LA and what happens others. And I've said this before, Walmart doesn't put a store in Ellicott City and the Bay Area and other places and then say to that store manager, hey, do your marketing. You know your market territory best. There are some things that they do to tweak, but that is their corporate strategy, right? Which is baseball, Walmart writ large. And that's what baseball has missed for a long time. And they haven't been able to capitalize. I've said this before in the fall. Shohei Ohtani was the biggest thing to come in the sport globally in the last 3 decades. And his day in the sun as the MVP lasted about 48 hours and it was gone. Now, again, I understand he's not strong in English, whatever, but that was a global, compelling story in the 2 biggest markets for baseball, North America and Japan. And it went like that. And I said, can you imagine? The NBA has taken the steps of investing in building a league in Africa. Why? Because they value basketball and they're saying, we want to make that connection. I understand what baseball is doing in the Dominican. They want the talent out of there. But it's not like somebody has said, we're going to invest in baseball in Australia and Japan and Korea and do all these things to do it. That's a huge undertaking. They've got enough right at their hands right now. But that kind of thought process, it just isn't there.
Seems
and I
as
don't think
if
that
there
way.
was a 7'6" player from the Shanghai Sharks who did pretty well
Yeah, right.
in the NBA.
Yeah.
And to Marty's point, I don't want to see a full page ad in newspapers across the country going, boo-hoo, we're really sorry. What I want to see is players at spring training or whatever they're calling it, stay an extra 45 minutes on the field and go like this.
Signing
Hey,
autographs.
Billy, come on over there. And I want one player to stay there for 3 hours and never leave, because there will be one who doesn't go till the last autograph. That's what I want to see. I want to see a little league game in the spring at some place, and holy crap, here comes a starter for one of the major league teams, unannounced, out to the little league field. Hey guys, just thought I'd come out and say hi.
Yeah, I
In-
want to know who
in-
this generation's Brooks Robinson is, who will stand
Yeah.
there forever. Somebody said we're going to make up these games that they lost with some 7-inning doubleheaders. I said, hey, that's great. Fans get 2 games for 1 admission. The condition for me would be players have to stand there for 30 minutes between a game, every player, and sign autographs for the 30 minutes between game 1 and game 2. You want to play 2 7-inning games? I'm all
Yeah.
about that. But
By
the
the way,
players show.
If you want
by the way, they are-
if you
by
want
the
to
way, they are-
magnetize, yeah,
they are doing 9-inning doubleheaders. They're not going to be 7-inning doubleheaders.
whatever it might be, if you want to magnetize fans back to the game, just have the fans interact with the players.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
not that complicated. It's not quantum physics.
One of the big takes from this CBA is they're going from 10 teams making the playoffs to 12, not 14. That's a 50% increase in the
Mhm.
last 11 years. Are the playoffs really what it's all about now? That's where the money is. Is that what it's really all about?
Well, I would say this, and Andy, follow up on this, please. That is
Sure.
what we know about those games, and the NBA is the canary in the coal mine for this, and the NFL to some extent too. Playoff and meaningful games are much more valuable to television than any other thing right now. Media companies are willing to pay 5-10x what they pay for a regular season game for a playoff game. So in that regard, an additional 8, 10, or 12 playoff games is worth, a substantial amount more, because the NBA has understood this. They've looked at their 41 home games and said, I don't really think that game in April or November or whatever is worth it as a mid-season play-in tournament or something where there's some interest in that. So I think baseball's got to look at their 81 home games and say, what's the best way for us to make use of that? And again, minor leagues have a split season. There's so many other things that you can do, but I think the playoffs are a help for sure, because they'll make some more money. Maybe that opens the interest in not just 2 more markets, but maybe 6, because there's 4 other teams competing for those 2 additional spots as well.
All right, we could talk.
I want a World Series. I want a World Series. I
Series.
want a real World Series. Okay, we look at soccer, we look at basketball. You look at China, you look at Japan, you look at Korea, you look at Central America, Latin America. Hey, if you want to really start being bold, think about building a true World Series, and you got something.
All right.
Little League does it. So
Go ahead, Gary. You got one, then I'll wrap it up with one.
I've
Go ahead.
got one more question. Andy,
Yeah.
you brought up baseball, investing money into the Dominican Republic and the internationalism of baseball. I think we're all
Right.
for that. Okay. And I think the investment in the Dominican Republic and Latin America in general, I don't think there's ever been a time maybe in Major League Baseball where there are more good Latin American players in the game than they are today. The question though is and you said it earlier also, Andy, that there are less black players in the major leagues today than at any other time since
Correct.
Jackie Robinson.
Right.
So my question is, to what level is Major League Baseball investing in the inner city? And would that be a good investment both on the field for the quality of play and also in the stands to get a larger fan base?
Marty, how long has RBI been in place?
30,
But what's
35
the-
years.
30,
But I mean,
35
is
years
that
probably.
really, are they doing a good job with it?
Not good enough, not when you have
So-
68 American-born African-American players on rosters last
That's my
year.
point.
Where are you building a brand new baseball complex in East Palo Alto, Compton, Bedford Stuy, et cetera, et cetera? That's what it's going to take. It's not going to take some cute cosmetic TV ad showing something that you think would.
I think, unfortunately, the African-American population, you can't say this about the entire population, but I just don't think I think the things that we love about baseball, they don't get that. It's not the same thing to them. They get football and they get basketball.
So
I don't
think
think,
if
I
you-
don't
yeah.
think there's a major comeback that African-Americans are going to suddenly find a way back to baseball.
So
don't see that.
I've thought about this too. I've even done a
Yep.
little bit of writing and research. Think about this, and you can do this after we do this show. This year's number 1 pick is probably going to be Drew Jones, right? Andrew Jones, his son. We've had African-American Byron Buxton. We've had a number of 1-1 players, African-American players, and you look at that roster. What I think is happening is it's much harder for players to get through the minor leagues today.
That's true.
Because of the influx of other additional talent. And it's much harder because when you look at the draft, their numbers are representative of the population. And I've seen already some outstanding young African-American talent in college baseball and in high school baseball when you go back and look at that first round picks. But it's been more difficult to get several of them through the system to the point where they are that Frank Robinson type player that we're all used to seeing. So go back and look at some of the drafting, go back and look at some of these other things. And then, I think the conversation about who arrives on the major league rosters, it's a little bit different than maybe what Andy and I were working on with RBI, 30 years ago, because we were not bringing in players from the Dominican and Puerto Rico and Asia and a whole host of other places.
RBI meaning return baseball to the inner city.
Reviving
That's what
baseball in the inner
reviving
city.
baseball in the inner city.
Yeah.
Guys, before we get out
It's
of here,
fascinating.
because we could go for an hour and a half. Give me, Marty, 3 things that you're looking for that are interesting about the upcoming baseball season. And then I'll ask Andy the same thing.
Yeah, I want to see the rules implemented. I want to see the game speed up, right? I want to see fewer shifts. I want to see fewer relief pitchers trotting in every other inning. I want baseball to be on top of that, looking at the game, saying, this isn't good for the game. We have to make this change and we have to do it in 45 days. I think the second thing is, like Andy said, they were the first league to get a deal done with Apple. Like the NBA and the NFL had been dying to get in there. Tell me more about that. What is it going to mean? I understand it's 2 games on Friday, but I also understand it's a nightly show on Apple Plus and all those things. And then finally, Rob Manfred and his leadership team, their number one job is to put butts in seats, period. That's job one for the leadership team. It's not a million other things that they've come away from the CBA, and that is a nationwide effort to put people in those seats. So instead of having 4,000 on night 2 in Baltimore or 12,000 in night 2 in Washington, that number is double or triple that number.
And I would
Andy?
just say, I'd put it in 3 letters, AAI, attendance, age, who's coming to the games, and what I call immersivity. How is baseball immersing itself back into its fan base, back in media, talking about autographs, all the simple stuff we talked about. So AAI is what I'm going to be looking for.
Do you sense, and a final question, Marty and Andy, and Gary, you can chime in too. Do you sense that baseball, the Major League Baseball, the entity, is thinking along the lines that you guys are, or are they just high-fiving that we got it done and now we can rush all this action on? I mean, it's mind-boggling how the rhythm of spring training no longer matters at all, because we can have 4 days and then you can start playing the game.
Can I answer that question
Yeah, go
for,
ahead.
Please,
I'll let
Andy.
Marty go?
No, go ahead.
I sent a letter. You remember letters, you combine words into paragraphs and you send them through the mail. I sent
Wait,
a
you
letter.
send them through the what?
The mail?
The mail.
USPS. I sent a
through your
letter
computer,
to
yeah.
an unnamed person at baseball, not the commissioner, but somebody around the commissioner, and said, there's a number of people in baseball like Marty Conway and Pat Gallagher and on and on and on. And, you might want to just bring these people together for a day and just talk about, and some of them are still working in the game. You might want to talk to them and have a debrief about what has worked so well over decades. And I was so surprised. The answer that I received was
No answer.
absolutely no answer whatsoever.
Yes, it was very surprising, very surprising.
And that really, really happened. And I'll show you the letter, gentlemen.
Marty, your thought, do the powers that be, are they thinking along the lines of you guys, or are they just high-fiving that we got it done?
Yeah. There's this thing in Silicon Valley called design-centered thinking, and that's where they start with the consumer and they work their way back out. Every great product that's come out of Silicon Valley has that same approach. Baseball is almost the opposite. They think they've solved the business elements of baseball, the relationship between managers, general managers, owners, and players. I think in all of those 99 days, they didn't really, maybe they enhanced the rules or they made some modifications to that, but I don't think collectively they said there's an open chair here in these meetings every day that a fan, they should have a rotating fan come in and sit in there. That person hasn't been there. What have we done for him or her? I presume that hasn't happened. We'll see something at the All-Star game or whatever, but it's not going to address the issues that are facing in Oakland and in Baltimore and in Miami and in those 6 markets that Andy talked about that didn't draw 1 million fans last year.
All right. Gary.
And Charlie Finley gave me this. It shrunk over time, right? It's the orange baseball that Charlie brought out. So if we see one of these, Gary, we'll know that baseball is definitely moving in the right direction.
You got amazing props. You got amazing props in that room, Andy.
Hey, I'm trying.
Let me just answer Stan's question real quick about are they high-fiving each other or what? My answer is this. If it took them 48 years to do the designated hitter in the National League, then they're high-fiving each other for solving this only. That's it.
All right, that's the final word.
Let's end it on a positive note.
Yeah.
Play ball, right?
Let's do that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We thank our sports panel, Andy Dolich from the left coast, Marty Conway, both longtime executives in the world of professional sports, now both teachers at the university level. Thank you guys, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Gary,
appreciate it. Gary,
always
a pleasure.
Always great to be with you. See you guys.
Love you, and as Andy said, play ball.
Let's play ball. Bye.